So I heard from a friend about this Shades of Life thing, and I tried it once, and it felt like coming home to the kind of circle I always experienced with Christina Baldwin,
Mm.
and have been hungry for that and not able to find it or create it as I have tried. So I am coming back because I find it nourishing. So that's why I'm here.
Nice.
Great. Well, we welcome you and your voice and broadening our circle a little bit more as well. So, and
Yeah,
I've always appreciated the exchanges that you and I have had in other forums too. So it's a great place to come home to.
Yes.
so maybe the broader welcome of that for those listening, if you are listening, is that here we are again, Jerry Nagel, Kathy Jourdain, myself, Tenneson Woolf, and Janet Trump has joined us today for the second time in this little format. And just spontaneously and impromptu style said, "Hey, Janet, why don't you bring us in?" So yeah, thanks for being a sport, Janet. I love that. And you are naming some things that if we just play in it now, feel like they are one of the threads that that weave many of us together. I think a lot of us are looking for something genuine. A lot of us are looking for a space of home or a space of listening or a space of sharing story or even figuring out story. And I think that's a good description of Jerry, Kathy, you, and the three of us have been up to over the last year with this particular form of let's come together and let's learn and let's share a little bit about what we're curious about. So uh, just kudos, like thanks for following the spontaneity of it, Janet. In that spirit, I always like it when we do these calls that we're not doing a bunch of check-in before we start recording because I think often the check-in's got a pile of juice in it.
Yes.
So I think the round, which Janet, you've kind of started here, but you might have a little bit more to add, is just a little bit about how you doing and what some of what has your attention. Because I think if there's one basic thing that we follow here, it's what's a bit of what has your attention and interest, and what might that have to do with the bigger pattern of who you are as a human or who we are as humans. So let's do a round of that, shall we?
Sure.
How are you? What has your attention slash interest? What's some of what has your attention and interest?
Well, I'll start. I am very much aware of the calendar and the end of the year and wanting to get some things. I have like two or three little nodules of things that need to be cleaned up, and I want to get it done. And because I have this sense that I've been through a lot of change, and now there's this emerging snake without its skin or with its new skin that hasn't been roughed up yet. And what's that going to be? And it's very curious. There's no fear. Um, I'm also just finished reading Being Mortal, which was interesting reading at an older age. Everyone I know who's read it has been younger, and um, so it was like, okay, here's the future. I don't know when it's coming, but here's the future. So I'm very much settling into not being busy, but being wholly present.
Sweet. Okay, I'll jump in. Um, I feel like when I'm responding well to the question of how are you and what has your interest, most often I'm responding to things that have taken place within the last 24 hours. And I often feel like Those things in the last 24 hours are more specific things, some of them bigger circumstance, some of them a little smaller, but they somehow connect into the broader pattern or the broader theme that the human that I am seems to want to follow. And one of those things, I have some of that Christmas tucking in me. Actually, with my sweetheart, the other day we were talking about how everybody's trying to tuck things in right now. And so it means that, if you're a Christmas person or whatever holiday person you might be, there is a little bit of trying to just settle things so that maybe you can let it go. Even that alone, I think, is an interesting kind of patterning question. The way that I have things that I enjoy doing, but I also want to let them go. I participated in another community, a practice call yesterday. This one was for the flow group or flow game. And there were 18 or so people convened by some others, people who are mostly flow game hosts or associated with flow game in a way. And we broke into smaller flow games groups. And in the group that I was in, one of the cards drawn was a question. Uh, the overarching question was, what will help the flow game to flourish, or you flourish in the flow game in 2025? It was something like that. And then the specific card drawn was a card that had the question, what nourishes roots or nourishes your roots? And a couple of people, this was a group of 8 or 9, so a few different voices that were there, and a couple spoke about, well, water nourishes roots, and then started playing with the physical need for water as well as some of the metaphorical need. And then someone shifted into, well, roots need sunshine too. Sunshine helps things grow. And I was staring out my window that I'm looking at now, and I can see a few bushes that are in the property line. And it just had me thinking about roots and sunshine because the sun does tend to shine down there. And then one other person added in a way that just felt like it was thickening or maybe completing, said roots need rest also. And in this northern hemisphere was referencing the need for rest, so the need for a bit of tucking in, and maybe that desire, maybe there's something deeply innate in us that knows a rest period matters too. All of that just surfaces for me as I speak, but in the spirit of the last 24 hours, I did host a group last night of faith community leaders, and it was the first time for me meeting with them. There were 12, and they're kind of tasked, senior leadership kind of style, tasked to further integrate a couple of communities that have been separate. And when we began that call, the more described, or the more, I don't know what to call it, the more literal definition of purpose, why are we here, was around governance and leadership, and that's true for them. That's part of their role and task. But this is my first time meeting with them, and I knew that I wanted to name that something tangential or close to it. The language I used was, hey, I know that this is a meeting about leadership and governance, but I want to also suggest and encourage paying attention to what lives nearby that. And I named it as becoming and belonging. And to me, that brings in a little more heart, and it brings in a little bit more of the poetic that I also appreciate. And I think it just signals to people, it signals my hunger to rename or repurpose some of that, or tangentially repurpose it. But I think it also just speaks to permission for people to, now we can get to the deeper stuff, Those are a couple of things that I come in with today.
You want to go?
Sure.
I like the way the tree is right between you, by the way.
It's by design, Tenneson.
There you go. You guys are staging galore.
Well, delighted to be back in this call again. I'm glad you're joining us, Janet. And something that you said kind of sent me in a direction of what's on my mind now. you know, in the larger sense for the past, you know, since November 5, the future in general has been on my mind. And, you know, what's that going to look like? What's life going to be like here?
We're there.
Or there.
Or everywhere.
He's in Canada with me right now.
I know. There we go.
Um,
Talk finance ministers, Jerry.
yeah, right, right. Yeah, and how we're all going to just sort of respond to whatever shows up. And we just got an email a little bit ago from a friend. And in part of the email, he said,
You're stealing my check-in.
you
Not
should
possible. Not possible, but do go on.
he mentioned that more than ever, community is going to be really important going forward. And where that took me is, you know, what is a community, and the danger of finding community just with like-minded people. I'm concerned that's could become a very real trend, that we just begin to isolate into in groups and out groups, and our in groups are people that think just like us, and then when there isn't any, when there's what is the phrase, when knowledge isn't knowledge because you think you know it all and you don't have any curiosity then. And so I'm just carrying now a little some anxiousness or anxiety about that we don't define community as just singular groups, you know. And in some of the work Kathy and I have been doing around workplace culture, a workplace is a community, and how people relate to each other and interact in the workplace really impacts what that sense of, as you said, Tenneson, belonging or community is. And can we be a community of not singularly like-minded people, in whatever definition you want to put that, social, political, faith, whatever, but welcome in a range of perspectives. And I think the fear is that we're afraid to do that we can't have good conversations with people that don't think exactly like us, and so we just avoid them. And there's some evidence that says that that's a problem out there, but yeah, that's kind of what's I'm storming around.
Nice.
Well, I'll pick up that thread of community because I was struck by that email as well. Jerry and I are in the process of reaching out to people about the art of hosting training that we're offering in February and asking them to spread the word. And that's part of how I've been framing it in the emails that I've been sending out, is the importance of community and connection and building our networks. And so just in what Jerry said, like there's a couple of threads there that I think are really important, because community, as you noted, has many definitions. And so, you know, my family could be a community, my neighborhood could be a community. This Shades of Life is a community that we come and hang out in. And so there could be one element of community that is coheres around the same way of thinking. But I think there's also levels of community that cohere around kindness and generosity and compassion. And if we're cohering around those things or in those ways, then we're creating the spaces where we are inviting a diversity of views and we're wanting to understand other people's perspectives. And then when you think about in groups and out groups, if somebody showed up to community and just wanted to smash it, then I don't necessarily want them in my community. If they're showing up with very different perspectives or views than me, and we can have a conversation about it, then to me, that's a different thing as well. But even as I say that, and I have said this in other places, is I have within me a deep level of anger about the outcome of the election. And
The
I can't.
election, the US election you're speaking
US
to.
election, yes, and I could well feel that way about the Canadian election whenever it comes up, given the dynamics that are going on here. Because the values that I have around decency and faith in people and all of that are pretty deeply challenged. And when I see the plans or whatever, all of that just goes against what I believe and what I value as a human being. So I have to take a lot of care around what I take in. I look at headlines. I barely open articles anymore at all. I just kind of want to have a flavor of what's going on. And then I have to turn my attention to the things that I can influence or control or create. And show up to conversations like this where, people are supportive and encouraging. We can commiserate together for a few minutes if we want to and not get lost in it, and then just turn our focus to the things that inspire us and, bring us joy or bring us light. I'll stop there.
Nice. Janet, spin us. Could you?
I can try.
Were you, sorry, you did this last time too, but you do have a uniquely positioned last name. Will you just context
Yes.
that?
Yes. The context of that is that I am 8 years ahead of you. I have been dealing with not fitting what everyone thinks fits me
Mm,
because of the name. And it has amazingly created opportunities to have conversations because the
mm,
person on the other side assumes I'm one of them.
mm,
And I have learned, and it was a very painful learning. I don't mean to sound accomplished or superior. It was through bloody engagement that I can talk to anybody.
mm,
And it was mostly by asking questions about maintaining curiosity.
mm.
We had rentals. I went to a place to buy an appliance, and the gnarly little dude who was smoking every 20 seconds said, well, I like your last name, so I'm not going to charge you the regular delivery fee. I'm only going to give you the $10 delivery fee. And I went, okay, this is the first time my last name won me any prizes. And he got to talking about, as in our household, we refer to him as Uncle Donald. And the man said, well, he's our only hope. And I looked at him and I said, do you really think anybody who gets to the White House cares about you? And he sat there and he said, well, my father always said, if they're not crooked going in, they're crooked coming out. So
Gosh.
in that moment, we connected, not a way I would have designed or envisioned, but it taught me that I need to stay curious. And, the question that came up while you were talking, Kathy, which has come up for many people I know, it come up in me in listening. Why are you raging?
Mm, mm,
And I think it comes out of the 8 years of being disappointed in the collective. And well, we've survived so far. If you read American history, there have been times that have been every bit as bad, if not worse, and we survived that. So I'm coming back to the ground level.
mm,
And it's particularly poignant for me because we've moved 3 times in the last 6 years.
Gosh.
And I don't know a whole lot of my neighbors. And I have been so attuned to watching the recovery of Western North Carolina from the hurricane. And it's been almost 12 weeks, and it's only now starting to show up of what do you believe, what color are you? But for those 12 weeks, it didn't exist. So I thought, okay, if something happens here in the woods, let's just say the internet goes down. God knows Elon wouldn't do that to us. Um, who do I reach out to? So I know my one neighbor. So 2 weeks ago, I messaged her and said, "Hey, Sue, you want to get together over coffee? No, no big deal.
Yeah.
Just be neighbors. Just be women," is what I said. Let's just do woman talk. Sure, come on up. So I did that, and it was lovely. So the model that I have right now for how to live my life are the people in Western North Carolina. I need to know more of who's right here. And I need I want to be selective. The reason being, we have solar. So if the power goes out, we have water. But I don't want everybody to know that I have water, and it's like trying to get how to reach out, but not to invite the thundering hordes in. So it's this whole thing that is going on in my head about how to create a community,
Mm.
but not throw the doors wide open. And that feels wrong, but I I don't know any other way to do it. How do you survive if you let everybody in?
That's awesome. Okay, well, I'll pick up, spin it a little further, spin it within me. I feel like there's a whole collage there to pay attention to that I have some interest in. So, in no particular order, the question of why raging. When I start with an acknowledgement that I have an inner rager, even though it might be the 0.03% version of things, when I stay attentive to that, when I rage, it's because I'm afraid or because I'm scared or I maybe feel threatened. Maybe those all weave together. When I feel insecure, I'm more likely to push and maybe even try to impose my own certainty. Yeah, rage, but rage is another category too. When I, if slash when, own it, I reach the level of rage that is, I'm so fucking pissed off and need to throw things or want to throw things, then, then there's a whole queue of things like, oh, Tenneson, you need to take a walk. I think of myself as a pretty reasonable person, but I'd be lying if I said I don't have rage in me,
Right.
and thus an ability to relate to some rage also. But if we're trying to nuance, why the raging? Oh boy, when I'm scared, when I feel like my identity is threatened, that's probably one of those sources there. I'm kind of curious too, when the narrative lands, the narrative, that sounds so fancy. When the common rhetoric, that sounds fancy too. When it lands, when I can't find when the basic level of language and story is our only hope. Ooh, man, that makes me just question that one. Like how again, I'd probably have to look at myself and say, well, in what circumstances do I land in the our only hope storyline for me? But I feel that one's come out a lot in some of the, I'm not trying too hard, but in some of the conversations that drift into political toe dipping, I hear that kind of language. Well, he's our only hope. Or it could be the other way around, though, too. It could be many expressions of that. But when we get narrowed to our only hope, I get nervous and I feel a bit suspicious and maybe a little guarded, like, oh, okay, that's interesting. And I probably lean back a little bit.
Yeah.
So, I've been in some version of those, and it contrasts a storyline. Now I'm pulling it out of politics, but into, some desires that I've had in being a dad and being in family, where I end up saying, there's
Oh,
always another way. Like, this is one of those values that I've been able to give a little extra weight to with my kids, in the spirit of, if you're only going to remember one thing about dad, remember this, and that there's always another way. I'm super duper proud when I see my kids embodying that. But I'm naming it here because it's not just a random thing for me. I think that there are so many ways to be curious about what's happening and to make the story bigger. That doesn't mean always making it messier either. I'm kind of going back, Jerry, maybe to a bit of what you were saying earlier about how do we create curiosity? Or Kathy, I think you had some of this language too. What are we cohering around? Can we cohere around a curiosity? These are the kind of values that matter to me as the dad that I am, and living in the context that I am with a new sweetheart and new sweetheart, year and a half ish sweetheart, and Christmas is coming, and we've got multiple layers of family
yes.
coming, and some, discomfort with that from some. And I find myself returning to some of that language of, well, it's not our only hope. The contrast to our only hope is, there's always another way, and there's many shapes to family. So I find myself living in, the very personal of that to what I think is a much, much uh, broader cultural, wonder at this point. Let me stop there.
What's sort of storming around for me in the moment on community is how behavior can define community. And I live in a what's called a circle, so it's not an actual circle, it's more like a horseshoe. And I only know the names of a couple of my neighbors, but and none of the neighbors socialize with each other at all in the neighborhood. I've had some of them over when I had my housewarming, but that's about it. But we will visit on occasion, and wave at each other when drive by in the car or walk by people walking their dogs, and they'll be out. Whomever's out first with the snowblower might go up and down the sidewalk for everybody's house. Or if somebody's out shoveling, Joseph across the street has come over and shoveled with me and visited, or I've gone over there. Or my snowblower has been lent to one of the neighbors. When I was done with, and so we interact in a way that's supportive of each other without any real personal relationship.
Mm.
And what started me down that path was thinking it doesn't matter what your politics are in Minnesota. If you're in the ditch, people will stop and help push you out, or if you're having trouble changing a tire or this or that. And so, yeah, I mean, so community can be of a like-minded view on something, or community can be gender or whatever, but it can also just be a form of decency and care for each other, like you were saying, Janet, for people in North Carolina. And I don't I hope we don't lose sight of that. Don't put hope in an individual, put hope in our helping each other as human beings here on the planet, whether it's a disaster in North Carolina or Florida or elsewhere, or just down the street. I know because my neighbor knows that I'm gone, they'll snow blow my sidewalk if they have snow, because people will walk on that sidewalk, but they'll go up and down it. And I just hope that,
Mhm.
yeah, don't put hope in individuals, but in who we are collectively and how we treat each other.
Mhm.
Well, we can't make people feel a certain way or have a certain belief or whatever the case may be. So the only thing I can do is focus on my communities of interest and um we don't in our lives, we don't have time for everybody. We're always choosing who our priority people are. Here in where I live, I've got one really good friend who stops in quite regularly and friendly with the neighbors as well. But my social life right now, at the age that my kids and my grandkids are, that's my social life here when I'm home. Um, and they're my first priority. And I feel fortunate to have kids and grandkids who are that close and that close to me and who value that as well. Um, so, I have some of that. And then I think us gathering like this, or the things I'm doing with Dana, or the stuff that Jerry and I are creating, or other communities where I can bring the hope.
Mhm.
Then that's where I need to go, and not just for other people, but for me, because this kind of conversation and circle is nourishing for me, and it takes my thoughts away from the doom and the gloom and um the fear. Like when you said that, Tennyson, it's definitely, I know that fuels some of the anger that I feel and that I sense. And I'm more deeply engaged with my meditation and spiritual practices than I have been,
Mhm.
because that's just another way that I'm going to keep myself um to keep trying to take other people's energies off of me or not allow them in, so that I can be focused on the spiritual realms or the higher self, or those energies, and draw strength from the earth and things like that. And the more I do that, then the more grounded I feel, and the less fear I feel. So I don't want to live in fear-based um, a fear-based vibration for myself. And yet there are some days that it's hard to shake. And there are other days that I just, when I notice the joy, or just even a sense of peace and contentment, I'm like, I'll take that for today and see what
Mhm.
tomorrow brings. I don't know. So it's going to be, it's not going to be, it is just a really interesting time. And Janet, your point, and I know everyone knows I read Heather Cox Richardson, and it's the one thing that I like the most about her is weaving in the historical context and patterns for current day. And when you realize, like you said, that the US, the world, Canada have had difficult days before and dark days before, and somehow managed to step out of that, then there's hope there. And then on a spiritual level, they talk about once you're reaching some new level of vibration, or um, societal, I don't know, leveling up, whatever it is, that this level of chaos always precedes it, because
Mhm.
there's so much at stake for the people who have benefited from the way that things have been. So I kind of go, I can't stand it. And lots of times I'll say to Jerry, I can't talk about this thing, whatever this thing is, because it's crazy making for me. And so I kind of live in those two dualities of, I can't stand it, to the hopefully it's the prelude for the next best thing.
Mhm.
One of the things you said, Jerry, that really made me think about something is when you were talking about hope. And I realized that my hope has nothing to do with out there.
Mm.
My hope is the hope that if there is hopeless, my little bit of hope can infect somebody else with hope.
Mm.
And it's been very
Mm.
poignant recently because my grandchildren are all young adults.
Mm.
And one in particular was just irrationally devastated by the election. I mean, she just went off the deep end for 48 hours, and the way her father voted proved he doesn't care about her future, and I was like, whoo. So there was no response. There could be no response, just to sit and let the steam off.
Mm.
But all my life I was about fixing things in the world. And I don't know if it's age or circumstance or orientation of having looked at my own role in so many different things. I reached the point that the only thing I can be
Mm.
is to be a beacon of hope for those who are trying to work through the mess and figuring out how it impacts them and how they can be safe and do they have a future. And yeah, all I can do is listen and radiate.
Mm.
And to do that, a lot of times I turn things off because they want, or their whole purpose is to make me get excited.
Mm.
And it's become very protective of my soul
Mm.
in order to be able to be what I think is my job to be at this time.
Mm. For me, this conversation is moving even more around some other question that I feel like I and many hold: how to be a good human, and how to be a good human in the context, whatever that might be, and it's different in lots of ways and all of that. So I'm hearing us speak that way and trying to match it up with some of what I feel inspired or compelled or fatigued into doing. Uh, Age plays something for me. Uh, I'm 62, which feels young at one scale, and it also feels like I'm not 42 and I'm not 22. And I'm trying to be genuinely reflective about some of that difference. Um, the hope piece of it, Janet, I feel like I tend to lean to the appreciative. Lately, I've been kind of questioning that in myself. Like, yeah, you say a bunch of good things, Tennyson, but how are you doing internally with all of that? And there's
Mm.
ways that I feel like a hypocrite. Like I'm just like, holy fuck, man, I am losing it here at some scale. Um, but I tend to lean to things that I would park in the more hopeful category. When I think of that group that I got to host last night, I'm asking them questions that presuppose hopeful things or good things. Let's say a check-in question: who are you, and how did you find love of church and community? So I'm presupposing love and inviting them to speak to that, to animate it, to activate it. A little later on in the conversation, as we're kind of tucking it in, I said, imagine now a couple seasons have passed and we've done some of the work that we're starting to imagine here. I said, what do you want to feel proud of? And again, the proud presupposes that they are proud of something. I tend to lean in those directions. I do feel that it is a pretty thick discipline these days, like in a in a matured way or grown way, to be able to know that shit is going down,
Mhm.
and sometimes there's shit for us to jump into. Maybe always. But shit is going down, and at the same time, there are sweet little delights that are happening. And I tend to rely on that. With a person that I'm pretty close to in the last couple of weeks, he was struggling and feeling some mental health depression and despair and uh, a kind of hopeless quality. And I just joined in with them and said, let's be noticers of good things in our day. Make a list, 3 things, put it on your phone, and then we'll talk about it periodically. And as I shared with him, it was never about the things that are on the list. Well, let's see. It is about the things on the list, but underneath that lives the discipline of being a noticer, attending to these good things that are happening while all the shit's going down. And that's all. I think that's always been true. That's me trying to find a deeper humanity with that. But I think it is such a mass skill and discipline to trying to find the words, cultivate an emotional health that doesn't lose sight of hope and also doesn't dismiss shitty hard things. I rely on, still, what do I rely on? Oh, I'm going back to where you were, Jerry. I need simple things like you're stuck in a ditch, you help. I come from wintry, snowy climate, and without a doubt, you help shovel the neighbor's sidewalk, or you do a little extra beyond your own. I find I need those things. So, in order to help me be in the big story of community cohesion, etc., or honesty, I need little things like helping the neighbor shovel sidewalks. Whew. That's a bit. I appreciate the stirring here. I'll pause there.
Well, I might wander back up into a little bigger territory for a moment, Tenneson.
No, I'm still shoveling.
So 2 things. I recognize that I don't carry near the rage from out of the election that others do. And when I ask myself why, I kind of come up with 2 answers. One is because I've been around politics a long time and I know I've watched the come and go of it. But the other is I'm a white male of privilege. I don't really have anything to fear. There's not really much that's going to happen in the next 4 years that's going to hurt me directly. My kids or my grandkids, my neighbors, my partner, but not me directly. Well, unless they like close Social Security down or something, but basically, I'm fine. And I have to acknowledge that every now and then, remind myself of that I have this. I'm not just some old aging liberal hippie. I have this white male privilege thing. But the other thing then I wanted to kind of address is that I have to remind myself is a certain level of patience. Because these perspectives that we're sharing here, these worldviews that we hold, and we know that our worldviews are constructed in community, in relationship, are not very old. And I mean, in a sense of when we talked about time and the history of the United States and so on, so the civil rights movement as a national movement really didn't start till mid-60s. 1963, I think, was the I Have a Dream speech. The women's movement didn't start until the 70s. A lot of issues around gender, the Stonewall riots in New York, or Rachel Carson and the environmental movement. These are all mostly got started then. So they were just the ideas were beginning to take root, which means they weren't really even very universal in our national culture yet. Barack Obama, when he ran for president in 2008, was opposed to same-sex marriage.
Hmm.
So things that we may believe in, we can't assume that they've taken solid root nationally just yet. They're not, they're young ideas in many ways in our national psyche, and the danger is of going backwards. I think it is probably the danger that's out there. But I have to remind myself to be patient, that in recognizing that everybody has come to a similar worldview. And that white male privilege worldview is insidious, in particular, I think. And yeah, so I'll stop there.
I want to go back to talking about neighbors.
Thanks, Kathy.
I don't really have a lot more to say. I think other than just noticing and acknowledging the messiness of being human. And what you were describing, Tennyson, in terms of noticing sometimes like the internal atmosphere is not always matching the external, but none of us is ever like 100% in peace and contentment and joy and alignment and all of that. So it's like Bob Wing always used to say about the not Tai Chi, Aikido master.
Yeah.
And when he was asked about always being in his center, and he goes, I fall out of my center thousands of times a day. It's just how fast do I bring myself back? And I think whatever specific challenges we're facing, sometimes we can come back faster, and sometimes it takes longer.
Sweet. We're probably about that time, yeah?
Feels like it to me.
How about we do a round? Is there a little brief reflection from each of us, a gift that you got from today? Or a closing word? Cool. Okay, we're about to do brief checkouts, and Jerry, you just shared a little bit, but little checkouts that tuck us in well from this time.
I'm amused by the use of the word tuck in, which has been a very large part of this conversation, and I don't know that I've really heard it before.
Really?
Yeah. That's not it's not really my reflection. I think my reflection just goes back to what I just said about the messiness of being human. I said at one point to somebody, I haven't lost faith in humanity. I have lost faith in some humans, none of whom are like in my immediate circles. So that's kind of interesting. But it's messy at any time being a human being. It feels particularly messy now, given this era that we're in. And I just hope that more people remember their humanness and compassion and kindness, and that we pull that into all of the dark corners that we happen to be nearby and spread that out, like Janet was saying, getting radiate out the best of what we have to offer. And on the days when that is not the best we have to offer, or we don't feel like we have a best to offer, that we draw that from other people. Keep our wells as resourced as they can be. That's me.
Nice.
I would say the little nugget for me is this: the remember to find or see hope in the little things, the simple little actions that we can.
I would say the nugget there's like two. One is the tucking in, which is what I've been doing. And to me, that's when you tuck the little ones in at night, you make sure the covers are snug and they're not gonna throw them off. And that's sort of what I've been doing with family and the world, is tucking in the loose parts.
Mm.
And as wonderful as that is, it can't be everything. Because, as you so eloquently said, Tennyson, the shit is coming. And I've been particularly watching the conversation, and I think we're at a different pivotal point as a culture over Luigi Mangione
Mm.
shooting Brian. It's around healthcare and what is humanity. And every day I'm experiencing systems at the most basic level that aren't working.
Mm.
And so I'm the awareness of the shit out there is making me ask people about, what do you think about this? Where are you? Because I really think we are in a pivotal moment with that, more important than the election. We're in a culture change, and it's I don't even know where it's going. But yeah, just watching and paying attention and listening and continue to tuck in, but that's not enough.
I think my tucking in is that there's scales that I appreciate, and one of them here in this conversation today for the four of us is that, is that the doorbell?
Not here.
Oh, maybe it was my doorbell. Cheapers. Gotta go. There's the big story that is life flowing and trying to be in surrendering and contributing energy to that. That is a big story that feels compelling to me. And then there's much, much smaller increments of that, that is uh, trying to do good with neighbors, and the deeply internal path. I tend to lean into the internal path that says, oh gosh, I don't know about all of that out here, but I've sure got some work that seems fruitful here. I feel like I want to keep encouraging those kind of things, and sometimes it means, personally, deeply personal. Sometimes it's the professional and the kinds of questions that we get to ask and temporarily hold together that maybe contributes a little added insight or kindness or something that way. I'm really glad for today. Shades of Life. I'm glad we have our little conversations going. To any of you listening, thanks for listening. Shades of Life, Shades of Learning. I think it's Shades of Loving too. Appreciate you guys.
All right. That's a wrap.
Good.